Hi, my name is Tara Parker, and this is my timeline on George Bush's quest for realignment from 2000 to 2008. For the first part of this timeline, we are going to go over the 2000 presidential election between Bush and Al Gore. The 2000 election was one of the most controversial and tightly contested in American history. Voters were divided over major issues like the economy and health care. Both candidates had gained support from different parts of the country. As the results came in, it was clear that the race would come down to just one state, Florida, where results were extremely close and the outcomes would decide who became president. Al Gore won the popular vote, which meant more people across the country casted votes for him. However, the Electoral College decides the winner, and that came down to Florida's 25 votes. The vote count in Florida was so close that it led to recounts, especially from issues with ballots like hanging chads that made it hard to distinguish the voters' intent. The Florida Supreme Court ordered a statewide recount, but the U.S. Supreme Court stopped it, saying the recount process was unfair because different counties used different rules. On December 12, 2000, the court's decision gave Florida's electoral votes to Bush. Al Gore conceded the next day, on December 13th, even though he disagreed with the ruling. He stated, "Now the U.S. Supreme Court has spoken. Let there be no doubt, while I strongly disagree with the court's decision, I accept it. I accept the finality of this outcome, which will be ratified next Monday in the Electoral College. And tonight, for the sake of our unity of the people and the strength of our democracy, I offer my concession." For the next slide, we are going to go over faith-based and community initiatives. President Bush created the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives to help religious and local groups work with the government to serve people in need. He wanted to change how help was given by moving away from big government programs and towards smaller community-led efforts. Bush's administration made it easier for faith-based groups to get federal funding, especially small ones that had been left out before. These groups helped with issues like addiction recovery, prisoners' reentry, tutoring for kids, and health care for low-income families. Bush also supported programs that helped people find jobs, decrease homelessness, and recover from natural or man-made disasters. He believed that helping each other within the community, like churches or nonprofit groups, could be more effective than relying solely on the government. Internationally, Bush worked with local and faith-based groups to fight AIDS and malaria. He also wanted people to take part in more charities and volunteer work. Following his lead, many governors and mayors also started similar programs. For this next slide, we are going to go over September 11th. On September 11th, 2001, a terrorist group named Al-Qaeda carried out one of the deadliest attacks in the United States history. The group was led by Osama bin Laden, who had gained support in the Middle East during the 1990s. He believed the United States was responsible for many of the problems in the Middle East. Armed with the belief that the United States was responsible for many of the problems in the Middle East, bin Laden started encouraging violence against Americans. Early in the morning on September 11th, Al-Qaeda members hijacked 4 airplanes. 2 of them were flown into the Twin Towers in New York City, which caused both buildings to collapse. A 3rd plane hit the Pentagon near Washington, D.C., and the 4th plane crashed into Pennsylvania after passengers tried to stop the hijackers. Thousands of people died in the attacks on 9/11. The United States was not fully prepared for this kind of attack. Intelligence agencies had missed signs and warnings. They had focused more on solving past crimes than preventing future ones. Bin Laden had built a strong network, and the conditions in the Middle East helped him gain his followers. President George W. Bush responded by launching the War on Terror. The first target was Afghanistan, where Al-Qaeda was based. Later, we will learn about the war that expanded to Iraq. These actions were part of Bush's larger plan to reshape American foreign policy and protect the country from future threats. The effects of 9/11 are still felt today. Many people who are near the Twin Towers suffer from health problems, and the attacks change how Americans think about safety and the role of their government. George W. Bush's time in office was severely impacted by September 11th. His decisions after the attacks focused on protecting the country and changing foreign policies. For the next slide, we are going to talk about the United States Patriot Act. After the attacks on September 11, 2001, President Bush focused on making changes to national security and how the United States handled future threats. One of the most important changes was the Patriot Act, which gave law enforcement and intelligence agencies the power to fight terrorism. It allowed them to easily share information and use tools that helped catch drug dealers and other criminals. Taking these measures helped the government track down terrorist groups and stop attacks before they happened. The Patriot Act broke up terror cells in several states and led to the arrest of people who supported terrorism. It also made it easier to follow money trails and phone records linked to terrorist activity. Prior to the Patriot Act, it was harder to find terrorists than it was to catch criminals, but the bill fixed that problem. The Patriot Act also allowed the government to use modern technology to prevent future terrorism and crimes. Internet companies were forced to give customer records to the government during emergencies. To protect individual freedom, the Patriot Act added many new civil liberties. It also created a new position in the Justice Department to focus on national security, as well as making it easier to stop money transfers within terrorist groups. Overall, the Patriot Act was an important part of President Bush's quest to realign the ways the United States defends itself. On this slide, we are going to talk about the No Child Left Behind Act. In 2002, President George W. Bush signed the No Child Left Behind Act. This law changed the federal government's approach to education by bringing both political parties together to make sure all children, no matter their background, had access to good education. However, they would continue to allow local schools to make their own decisions. The law set high expectations for every student and required schools to help all students meet these state standards. Schools had to show results, and if students were not learning, the schools were given extra time and support to make improvements. Parents were given more information and more choices, including the option to move their children to better schools or get tutoring if their current school was not performing well. Federal funding for schools increased, especially schools in poor areas and programs for special education. The law also supported charter schools and created a scholarship program in Washington, D.C. to help students attend private or religious schools. Reading and math scores improved across the country, especially for African American and Hispanic students, students with disabilities, and children from low-income families. The achievement gap between different groups of students decreased. Additionally, more students learned basic math skills, and reading scores reached record highs. The law also encouraged schools to use programs that were proven to work through research. Teachers received better training, and schools received tools to track their students' progress. States were also given the flexibility to try new ways of measuring success and helping students that struggled. When Congress did not update the law, President Bush took steps to strengthen it through new rules. These rules focused on fixing problems with dropouts, improving low-performing schools, and making sure parents had access to good tutoring. Overall, the No Child Left Behind Act played an important role in President Bush's plan to realign the country by making education a national priority and ensuring that every child had the chance to succeed. This next slide is speaking about the Bush Doctrine. The Bush Doctrine was a major part of President Bush's quest to realign America's role in the world after the 9/11 attacks. The Bush Doctrine introduced new ideas regarding national security. Instead of waiting for threats from terrorists, the United States would take preemptive action by making strikes first. The doctrine stated that any countries who assisted terrorists would be considered an enemy. This led to invasions in Afghanistan and Iraq, which we will learn about in a bit. These preemptive strikes changed how the United States dealt with other countries. It focused on fighting terrorism and spreading democracy. While some people supported these goals, others worried that acting without support from other nations could cause problems. After a while, critics claimed the doctrine led to more conflict and made some regions less stable. The Bush Doctrine was a critical part of his effort to realign America's priorities. It showed his belief in strong leadership and taking bold steps to protect the country, even if it meant changing long-standing policies and relationships. The next slide is on the Department of Homeland Security. As part of his effort to realign the country after September 11th attacks, President George W. Bush created the Department of Homeland Security in 2002. This new department was designed to bring together many parts of the government to better protect the United States. This was the biggest change in how the government was organized since the Cold War. 22 different agencies were combined into one, including the Coast Guard, the Secret Service, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Immigration services were split into new groups like Customs and Border Protection, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and Citizen and Immigration Services. The goal was to make sure all parts of the government worked together to keep Americans safe. Some employees lost union rights during this change, which Bush administration said was necessary after terrorist attacks. The Department of Homeland Security was part of Bush's larger plan to change the ways the United States government responds to threats, as well as making national security a top priority. Again, this aligns with Bush's belief in strong leadership and taking bold actions to protect the country. The next slide focuses on the war on Iraq. As a result of the attacks on 9/11, President Bush announced the war on Iraq, which became a major step in his effort to realign national security. The war began in 2003 when the United States and its allies invaded Iraq to remove Saddam Hussein from power. The Bush administration believed Iraq was a threat because it refused to allow full weapons inspections and was suspected of building weapons of mass destruction. On March 19, 2003, the United States launched Operation Iraqi Freedom with the help of several other countries. Saddam Hussein was captured in December of 2003 and sentenced to death in 2006 by an Iraqi court. However, the war continued for years, with violence and insurgents making progress difficult. In 2007, the United States sent 20,000 troops as a surge to stabilize the country. The war officially ended in 2011, and it was revealed that there were no stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Although the reasons for the war in Iraq were later questioned, it shows Bush's willingness to take strong action to protect the United States in his quest for realignment. This next slide is in regards to Hurricane Katrina. In late August of 2005, Hurricane Katrina struck the Gulf Coast. Hurricane Katrina became one of the worst natural disasters in American history. The storm caused massive flooding, destroyed homes, and left thousands of people without food, water, or shelter. Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans the hardest, affecting many poor and/or African American people. When the hurricane first hit, President George W. Bush was on vacation, and he failed to respond to the disaster in a timely manner. His staff delayed giving him full details, and he stayed at his ranch for several days while the country watched heartbreaking scenes on television. When he finally returned to Washington, he flew over the damaged areas and was photographed looking out the window of Air Force One. Many people saw this image as a sign that he was far removed from the situation. Bush did not want to interfere with rescue efforts, so he chose to visit the disaster zone right away. People criticized Bush for saying he missed an opportunity to show support and leadership. The public was frustrated when Bush praised the administrator of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, who later resigned. Polls showed that people's trust in Bush dropped significantly following Hurricane Katrina. Although Bush later sent billions of dollars to help with recovery and made several visits to the area, the slow response hurt his reputation. Hurricane Katrina became a turning point in his presidency and raised doubts about his ability to manage a crisis. This next slide is about the Economic Stimulus Act of 2008. On February 13, 2008, President Bush signed the Economic Stimulus Act to boost the United States government and avoid a recession. The law gave rebate checks to most Americans, including low-income families, seniors, and veterans. Businesses also got tax breaks to encourage investments. Bush called it a booster shot for the economy, hoping it would increase spending and avoid a deeper recession. The Economic Stimulus Act also made sure that these payments would not count against people applying for help through programs like food stamps, financial assistance, or energy assistance. This showed Bush's effort to respond quickly to financial need while keeping his focus on limited government and personal responsibility. Thank you for checking out my timeline, and I hope you liked it. It was really difficult to do this because I do not like public speaking or recording myself or doing any of this sort of things. But I hope this all made sense and showed the point, which was Bush's realignment or quest for realignment between 2000 and 2008. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And I hope I never have to do this again. All right. Thank you, guys.